Okay, thank you. Okay, so you should just see now Azure portal, because I'm going to share my slides here in a sec, but you should see something I'm sharing now.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Now you should see my slides. So, okay. This is handle Azure SQL Auditing with ease. And I am Josephine. I have a lot of DBA experience. I've worked mostly with SQL Server, and then in the last few years, I've been doing Azure and AWS, and actually even Postgres on-prem, like Postgres and cloud stuff like that too. Oh, I want to now, this is the first time you're seeing this cover. This is actually the first time I'm putting this out here. Is I have an auditing book coming out next month. I actually have to review all the proofs this weekend. So that book is not released yet, Practical Database Auditing there, but it is coming, and it's going to have a lot of this stuff that I'm talking about. It's going to go into even more detail, which is kind of nice because it's hard to fit it all in the presentation length. But anyway, so that's there. I'm very excited about that. And so you can reach me at on Twitter at Hello SQL Kitty, or I blog sort of intermittently because I actually had two publisher contracts at the same time, which I highly recommend never doing because it's way too much work at the same time. So anyway, it's intermittent there on SQL Kitty, but I'm there. You can see all my information and stuff there too. So really quickly, I go over what is auditing, in case there's some confusion around what it is, why you want to use it and such. And I think a lot of people think, oh, cringe auditing because, oh, I'm going to get in trouble for doing something wrong or something like that. But I personally think auditing is a good thing. It's just to make sure people are following proper procedure. And if you don't have procedures, that might be the case in some places. It can help you figure out what you want it to look like because you're like, ooh, I don't want somebody doing that. So why, right? Why should we audit? Maybe your company doesn't think it's important. Maybe you're required, you don't know how to go about it. Maybe your company doesn't want to get a third-party tool. It can be expensive and complicated to set up too. So I know because we had one, and I just don't think it should stop you from auditing. Whatever the roadblocks are, I think you should have it because I set it up originally. My company didn't even care. Well, I shouldn't say they don't care. It's just that it wasn't a priority, I guess. I mean, they love it now. I set it up because I was tired of people saying, oh, that's broken, the database is something's wrong. And I didn't know because I couldn't say because I didn't know what had changed. And so now we have a daily report, a weekly report, kind of things that we review. And we got acquired by a more heavily regulated company anyway. So they wanted us to have these reports. I already had in place, so it was really good. So really you're in the dark without auditing, right? Because it can help you figure out if something changed. Maybe that changes what broke something. Maybe this user was set up for one reason and it's not shared around by everybody and everybody's using it now. And you can audit, I said SQL Server here, but you know that applies to Azure too. It's very similar, as we'll go through and you'll see here that it's very similar in Azure in some ways and different in others, right? So I have to make some fixes to slide 5. I keep meaning to say Azure, but anyway, SQL Server, Azure, it's all, anyway. So we will go really quickly over this differences in the cloud, right? So, you know, if you have a VM, obviously it's the same. That's just, it's a VM in the cloud. It's like SQL Server on-prem. You can just do everything the same. And then with RDS and managed instance, right? So we have that, it's the same. You could use the GUI, it's all very nice. It's got the similar options as SQL Server on a VM, but you know, then you have to use cloud storage, right? Because you don't have the disks right on the machine itself, or you don't have like a network drive or whatever. That's where we put stuff. Well, actually, I take that back. That's our backups. With the audit stuff, even on on-prem server, like you can't write them to a network share. So you putting them on the disks itself. But with managed instance RDS, you can't do that. You got to have cloud storage like S3 or blob storage, right? So then we have Azure SQL, which is the most different of the bunch here, because you cannot do SQL Server Audit like the built-in, like in the GUI click, right click, set up an audit type thing. You have to use the portal, which is the quasi equivalent. It has a lot of the same functionality, but just, the portal interface or PowerShell. And then it also has extended events, which is very similar to SQL Server. So what we're going to go through today is Azure SQL because of its differences, right? It's a lot different if you're familiar with SQL Server Audit already. This is going to feel similar, but it's just, it's not the same. So basically, like I said, it's built into the portal. And then, so the server audit applies to all the databases, right? There's no option that says, oh, well, it's not easy to tweak the settings like a SQL Server Audit. It's not quite as easy as that, but it is very easy because there's a radio button. And so the thing is, you don't want to enable at the server level and then enable also at the database level. That's the thing I might mention more than once here, because what happens is you get duplicate audit data. And the other thing is the difference between this and SQL Server Audits, there's no filtering. It's not like you can say, oh, hey, I only want to get that Josephine user because I don't know, she's doing some kind of monkey business or whatever. I want to see what she's doing. It's not quite like that. So you can't do that. And then you just get everything and you pick through it. But I'm going to show you some tips and tricks here so that you can minimize your everything a little bit. And so auditing is in all the pricing tiers. In fact, I haven't set up in basic because sometimes things are not in basic, but auditing is even in basic. So when you set up the auditing, it applies a default auditing to it, right? You say, oh, I turn it on and it gets these audit action groups. They may seem familiar if you're the sort of naming convention stuff is familiar to SQL Server Audit, but this gets everything. So it's getting, if it's successful, failed logins, it's getting everything that happens. Let me tell you, that's a lot. If you haven't used SQL Server Audit, I'm going to tell you there's all kinds of things going on in the background SQL Server does to support whatever a user is doing. And you will see, because I left it on in my audit, so you can see it in the portal. We'll go through that in a second, but I like to tailor that a little bit more. So you can do that with PowerShell. You can do that in the portal with PowerShell. So here are some commands. I'm kind of going through the slides a little bit faster just because I'm going to show you in the portal some of this stuff as we go through. Hopefully, I usually do this in an hour. I'm going to like condense it down to 40 minutes. But anyway, there are links on the resources slide of this deck that give you more information as well. These slides are up in my GitHub, which is SQL Kitty. And so you can go back and see the slides and the code from the slides up there too. So don't worry if it's too fast, you can always go back and see that stuff. So to get your current auditing policy, you can run this command. This is just the Azure CLI. So there's some on the resources slide with that too. So you can kind of understand and that aspect of it. Anyway, you can see from here, audit action group, those are the default ones. You kind of just need to know that. They don't necessarily tell you default or whatever. So those are the groups you can see there. And then here is just, these are the groups you can use in Azure. They are slightly different than SQL servers. If you did a comparison, some of them overlap. Some are only in Azure, some are only in SQL Server, but these are the ones available to you in Azure. Again, there's a link on the resources slide so you can see what each of those do. And then here is how you can change it. So this, it seems messy, there's a lot there, but it actually, considering how many things, actions we're getting here, groups, we're actually getting a lot less in the audit. What comes from these things when people make schema changes or object change, different things, changes like permission changes, security changes, such, you're getting a lot less stuff. This is my preferred method of auditing so that you're not getting everything in the kitchen sink. So we'll go through that in a minute though. And that's not required. You can get everything. You don't have to touch PowerShell. You don't have to change in the audit action groups if you're not comfortable with that. The nice thing is you can store everything in, say, what we're going to go through your storage options here in a sec, but you can store all that and it's not a big deal if you do that. It's not like SQL Server where I find if I audit too many things and it's maybe hard to stop the audit, or I'm getting too much, I was kind of overload at a certain point. If you audit everything in Azure is not the case. It's very lightweight. I found it's not like an issue where you want to turn it off and it's auditing something. Like in SQL Server, it's auditing something. It might say to you, no, busy, go away. In Azure, there's not that issue. So I don't worry as much about how much I'm collecting. Anyway, so this is where you're on the server level of Azure SQL. So you see the SQL server level here. So then your databases are in here, but this is where you turn on the server level. So it literally is just this little radio button. It's very easy. You have a few choices for destinations. You also have the option to audit Microsoft support operations, and you can either put those in the same location as you're auditing or a separate one. I recommend getting the Microsoft support operations just because that way you can see what they're doing in the background. I haven't really encountered any issues with Azure SQL per se, but we've had some problems with VMs in the past with some of the operations going on behind the scenes and making them unavailable. So I think it's always a good idea to see what's going on so you can troubleshoot any issues you might be seeing. It's up to you if you want that mixed in with your audit data or you want it separate, so that, I can leave that up to you. So you have three choices for your storage, right? You have storage, which is like, it's the storage account. You got your blobs and containers and stuff. And then you have log analytics, which personally is my favorite. And then you have Event Hub. So quickly we run through what that looks like. So, right, you set up a storage account. I just give out the advanced properties for you. I don't really change that stuff. Zero's forever, by the way. I wouldn't keep things forever, but those are the defaults there. So you have your storage account, right? And then you set it up, you go into your audit, enable it, click your storage account, put it all in there, right? So this is what it'll do. And why I don't like this method is it puts XEL files, so extended event files, because SQL Server Audit is even extended events under the covers, even though in SQL Server it has SQL audit files. In this case, it does not have that at all. It has XEL files because that's really what it is underneath anyways. So the thing is, it does this thing where it puts in a folder and then a subfolder and then this, and then is in the day folder, and then it has a file. It is hard to loop through. I mean, if you're fancy with PowerShell or whatever, you can loop through it and centralize this data or get it, but that's not for me. I don't mess around with that much PowerShell. So anyway, that's storage account, right? Then you have Event Hub. And this, okay, I was going to mention, I usually put this audit stuff in the same region where my databases are. You might have different regions. I mainly we're all in East US 2 where I work. You just plop them in there. If you have different regions, you may have to come up with a strategy how you want to have your audit data, where you want to keep it. But in the case of Event Hub, if you decide you want to use this method, it absolutely is required to be in the same region. So that's just one limitation of Event Hub, for instance. And then to consume, I don't even know how this works. I set it up and then I never consumed anything. I just wanted you guys to all see that this is one option you could do, and you have to set up a stream to consume them, and it's in JSON formatting and all that. And it was like, okay, my mind is totally blown out. I don't use Event Hubs. I never did. So I was just like, yeah, that's an option. If you're already using Event Hub, maybe at your work, who knows, then maybe that's a good choice for you. Anyway, it's there for you. But this is my favorite, log analytics. It winds up, I thought at first, my gosh, this is so easy to use. It's so easy to use. And you can just put all your databases the same one. So there's your centralization, basically. And it's nice. It's so nice and so easy. Anyway, so it's just so easy, really. In the end, you use this Custo. We'll go through that in a sec, but that's easy too if you know SQL or PowerShell. You're not going to have a problem. So to view the audit logs, so you set it up in server, right? We turned on server auditing. We put in the log analytics. We're like, okay, good. And then to view it, there's two different ways to view it. One is which you can go into each database and go to auditing. So you have this auditing tab here, and then you can click view audits, and you can go to log analytics, and then it brings up your logs. And that's convoluted to me, but so that's one way. And the thing is, like I'm going to remind you again, is you turn it on the server level and don't turn on the database, all the databases, because now you can get everything twice. You don't want to do that, because now you're paying for storage. Storage is not very expensive, but still you don't really want to have all that stuff. And so yeah, so I did do something in my little screenshot you can see, but see there's some other stuff here you're gonna see in the demo too, like declare additions. I didn't run that. That's what SQL Server is doing in the background, right? So just so you know. So one thing I will tell you is that it takes some time when you enable SQL Server SQL Server. I'm so used to SQL Server Audit still. I did a whole year of presentations last year. I still got it stuck in my head a little bit. The thing is, when you turn it on, patience is a virtue, because it doesn't get in there right away. It doesn't, like, you turn on the audit in Azure SQL and you go right, you do something, you log into a server, you do something in the database, right? It doesn't get in there right away. It just takes a little time. Just basically you have to wait a little bit. So, because then like you come here and it's going to say error out, or it's going to say there's no data. That's just because it takes a little time. I think it's probably like, you know, sometimes it could be 30 minutes, it could be up to an hour or two. It just depends. It's like I said, unfortunately, when you first turn it on, patience is a virtue, right? So also, you know, it's not going to get anything in the past before you turn the on. It's not going to like retroactively get anything. It might not capture anything while it's still thinking about auditing too. So if nothing's showing up, that means it's not, most likely not query. It's not getting audited at all, just so you know. So, but I prefer, so remember I said there were two ways you can get at it, the way I just showed you through the database, but instead you can go to the Log Analytics workspace and you can go to the workspace summary, which there's two ways in Log Analytics to see the data, basically. So, because now geez, this is starting to turn into like a snowflake here, where I'm like, oh, it just keeps spreading. But so we're in Log Analytics, right? So you can look at the workspace summary, which is a nice dashboard. So you can see stuff like, oh, look at these different audit actions and how it's divided between, oh my word, that's not good. PowerPoint just crashed. Anyway, since I was right on that slide, basically what I was going to show you on the slide while my PowerPoint restarts is, that was weird, I've never had that happen, is this lovely dashboard that you can see on my screen. That was literally what was on my slide at the time when it crashed. That's convenient. So let me get PowerPoint back up here. The thing is, this is nice. This dashboard that you're looking at, that I'm going to get back to that slide in a sec here, is very nice because you can just see as a high level what's going on, like what's been happening, what is going on, like what databases are getting hit, you know, what are IP addresses, what are different principals, like, are they successful, or did they fail? And there's the slide again. Okay, so anyway, and then you can drill down into those things and see more details. I personally, I don't really like doing it that way. It's nice to see high level, maybe if you need a dashboard or something, but I personally would rather go into Log Analytics workspace and click logs. It's in the same area, just a little bit down from the workspace summary, and then run this custo query. So this is where I mentioned custo is not hard to learn. It's pretty easy. I think I came up with this query in like, you know, 5-10 minutes or something or less. I don't know. And there's example, if you go from the database, it actually creates a query for you. And that's sort of how I started, and then worked out what I really wanted to see and how I wanted to group it to get to this query. So there's always examples and stuff for you too. So it's never like, oh, you're just flying blind. And then this little red box down here is, usually I see NT authorities system when I'm making changes to the audit, like with the PowerShell I mentioned. If I changed it, I'll see some of those come filtering through, just to tell you that if you see that stuff, you might want to filter it out, or, you know, some stuff may come through your audit that's different than mine. So you may need to do some different filtering if you want. That's where I'm coming from. If you get everything under the sun, right, you just leave the default auditing, you can always filter it out here in your custo query. You can just say, oh, okay, I don't want to see some of this other stuff, like, you know, how all this stuff, this is all stuff that when I was running as Azure admin, SQL, this, you know, the engine behind the scenes is doing all this different stuff. It's not me always doing it. So this is my query from the previous slide, getting this stuff, you know. So remember that thing I told you when you first enable it though. So sometimes this will error out or do a, you know, give you no data at first. So just wait a little bit. Sometimes I would disable, re-enable it too. If it was like a really long wait after hours I was waiting, I would do that too, just kind of jumpstart it a little bit. But anyway, that's how it looks. And then we have this here is an example for you. We are now at the database level, right? So we're at SQL database. So we're inside that SQL server now. And you see it says server level audit enabled. So that to me, it's funny, it's green, but it's my red flag warning that I don't want to turn on database auditing now, because this server level audit's going to get this database already. So you don't really want to do that here unless you have a very specific use case. Like you're saying, okay, I want to audit this database specifically because I'm going to put in a different place. I'm going to do something different with the data, maybe something like that I could see. But don't just turn it on and store it in the same place because you think, yeah, just be careful because then you're getting 2 of everything instead of 1. So I'm going to jump into a demo and I'll take a breather for a sec in case there's any questions. And I can have a little drink. Oh, I'm still in here, aren't I?
You are.
Okay. I was like, you know what? One time I was recording a presentation for a conference and I realized at the end I had not shared my screen. And I was like, dang it, I had to start the whole thing over. Now I just thought maybe I was talking to a void, but I saw the red line on my screen, so I figured I'm still sharing. Okay. Okay.
Can you talk about expected log volumes a little bit,
Yeah.
just to give people some ideas?
Yeah, I'm not sure the actual, I'm not sure the actual size in like say megabytes or gigabytes that gets in there. I will tell you this though, I need to add, actually, that's a really good question because let me think more on, I won't tell you today, unfortunately, because I'd have to like look it up, but I'm going to add some more information on log analytics pricing. On because I couldn't really tell you. It's very low cost in terms of how much your SQL database is costing you. This is costing you way less. Let's just put it that way. Right. So I guess it depends on how busy your server is too. But I'd have to look and to see, to give numbers. So I'll do that, and then I'll update my information in GitHub, and then you guys, can always pull the slide deck again. So I'll give you more information. Okay. But I would say that it's not breaking the bank or anything because we have auditing on some of our busy Azure SQL databases, and honestly, it's not like something that pops up anywhere near the top. It's this little piddly thing at the bottom. I will tell you this, that log analytics by default, it's a little bit confusing, actually. It's 30 or 31 days because Microsoft says it's 30, but when you go in the portal, it actually says 31 as the default. So it's going to keep that many days. So depending on how busy your server is, then you can change that too. I mean, you can set it lower if you want to. You don't want to keep 14 or whatever you want to keep, right? So let me look at the pricing and give you a more definitive answer though. So I got that written down. But I'm going to tell you, it's not like, you can set it up to 730 days retention. Now that might cost a lot, but I don't think 30 days is going to cost you a lot. It's some really small amount. But I'll get more and let you know. It'll be in a slide deck that I put up there going forward. So I don't know, I could update you guys somehow otherwise, but know that I'm looking into it.
Thank you.
Okay, was that it for now? Questions?
I can't see anything in the chat.
Okay, coolio. I lost the chat. I don't know what happened. I minimized it and I can't get it back. So, okay. So here we are, our Azure SQL. So I set this up and it's all set up because we don't want to sit here for like 30 minutes to 2 hours or whatever, waiting patiently for the audit. So anyway, so we are actually in my database, right? So we're going to go up to the server. Because remember, you don't want to set it at server level and the database level. I prefer just doing server level. It gets everything the same, it gets all databases in it. I prefer that. So we go in there, we look at auditing. You can see I already have it enabled, and you have your different destinations. I'll put it in log analytics. Note that you can't create a log analytics workspace from here. Sometimes in Azure you can say, under there, you can say, oh, create new. There's no create new here. You got to create your log analytics first before you can set this up in here. Then you have this support operations. Like I said, you can enable this and you could put it in the same place or different place. I don't have it enabled here in my little test place because I didn't really think about it too. I should though, actually, because then you guys could see some stuff filter through the audit. So every time I do this presentation, I think of something else, and somebody asks me a question, thank you, that reminds me of something I'm missing. So anyway, so that's there. I just left that off for now. And then if you go, let's go to databases really quick. We go into the databases, right? So we go into my database and we look at auditing and we see server level auditing enabled, right? So that's my green red flag warning that I don't want to enable it here unless I decide, oh, well, I really want to just have this in a storage somewhere else, not in this log analytics I had set up, and I had some special use case for this one data, right? I could see a use case, something special, but this is not general, because otherwise you enable it here, you enable it here at this level. Now you're just getting two of everything, and that's a waste of storage. And you have to, you will have to pay for that, even if it's not expensive. It's still like, and it's just more data to have to weed through. So I highly recommend not doing that. So that's the setup. Really that easy. It's so much easier than SQL Server Audit setup, and so that's nice. There are good things about the cloud. I have to remember, sometimes I complain about the cloud. In some ways it's just different, right? It's not better or worse. It's just, I think it's just different. And so I actually really enjoy this Azure SQL Audit, because you can plop everything in. Here's this workspace summary I was showing you earlier when my slides died. And so there's the summary, and I didn't click in here as much, but actually I should have explained a little bit here, because you're actually going, right? I wasn't telling you what I was doing here. Log Analytics workspace. Let me make this maybe a little bit bigger so you can see, maybe that's a little bit better. So then you can see, now we're in Log Analytics, there's my workspace. And then you scroll down over here on the side and you go to workspace summary. That's where I got to the summaries, workspace summary, right? So now you're here. This is something, I don't know exactly what this access was sent to. This is something else, right? This is not related to auditing. In this case, we're not doing that. We're not setting that up anyway. It could be something that you're auditing, right? But it's just not something we're setting up as part of this auditing. And so you go into your dashboard, and then, like I said, you have all these different panels that show you different things. So you could drill down into each of these and see. And this is why I don't really like the built-in ones. I don't know. And it doesn't really show me exactly what I want to see. I want to see the query very easily. I don't have to like go down in here and to do this. That's why I built my own custom query, right? But this gives you an idea of like things you could do. That's why I sometimes click around in here and you're like, ooh, I could do that, right? So that's your workspace summary. But what I usually do is when I go into my log analyst workspace, I just go straight to logs. In fact, I don't really go to logs, and you'll see in a sec, because I automate some reporting on this stuff. But this will come up when you first come into your logs. This audit thing, that doesn't do anything you want in this case. So we just have to use our queries, which I think I have loaded here from yesterday. So let me grab it from my slide. Anyway, so just this query is just coming from the slide that I showed you earlier here. So I just plop it in from the slide, right? So this is everything I showed you earlier. Oh boy. Well, that's good. I'm glad I tested that before I did a demo, because that's always very nice. So hold on the fly. This happens to me sometimes. Oh, you should have seen the epic fail that I had at Group Buy one time when I was using Linux, SQL Server on Linux, and I forgot to set the perms on my folder, and I moved it with, and it's a long story. So anyway, so you see what I just did. I went to the SQL database and I came over here to auditing in the logs. Like I went through that other way I showed you, is to go into the database itself to the auditing, right? And if I can find auditing, there it is, and come in here and say view audit logs, right? And then, because I want to see what it thinks I should be querying. So then it brings up this query, right? And so this seems almost exactly like what I was doing, but let's take that course. Anyway, you just see my troubleshooting process now. So isn't that most of IT, is if you have good troubleshooting skills, you're going to go pretty far. So let's see here. So we come back over to logs. I don't know why it was unhappy. Probably definitely, maybe I should have tested my query before I ran it, because I know it works. It works, but it's not working right now. So anyway, this is what it will look like, basically. Why is it doing that? I don't see, here is where it, so this, okay, since we're in here and since things didn't work exactly right, of course, in my demo. So this is where I would want to say, I would take out, because I have all of my databases the same login links, right? So that's just gonna get one of them, or it's gonna get, so let's just take that out, right? So that looks good. That looks good. See, that's exactly what I had, except I had added this. Who knows? I'm gonna tell you right now, Custo can be a little bit wonky because I literally had that, and then I had and time generated in there, and then I had an order by, and that's the main difference. So who knows what happened there? So you're gonna get a bunch of stuff. My screen is so big. I made it so big you can read it now. You can't read it because it's so big. So okay, so this is basically my query. I just didn't have the order by in there. At the bottom, I add an order by. Oh, it has the order by, and that's exactly what I wanted. And now it take 100. I don't have to take 100, but I just want everything. Anyway, so that was interesting. Yeah, so anyway, that's a good example of how when you drop a custom query in, sometimes it doesn't work, even though you literally just got it from somewhere else and now it works. So life, it's complicated. So anyway, what I wanted to show you here really was that these things that come up here are things that are happening in the background. Like, see, there's like this auditing test admin account that I was doing things as. It's gonna just like put this stuff that's happening in the background. So for instance, if I'm over here and I decide I'm gonna create another testing table, testing my audit, I'm gonna create another table because I want to see if it comes through. So we're gonna come in here, refresh. Now we have this table, right? We have a table in there. And let's see how long. It could take a little while. So let's see if I have something else I wanted to talk to you about in the demo while we wait for it, because it doesn't come through right away. And oh, by the way, something to note. This is all in UTC. So when I first started doing this, I thought, wait, what time is it? So this is in UTC time. So we just have to wait. But we won't wait. We'll come back to this when we're done looking at the rest of the slides. So we don't want to sit here waiting, because that's another thing. When you do something like I just did that on this database, it's in this log analytics workspace. It's going to come through eventually. That's just something to note. It's not like boom, you do something and boom, it's in the audit like 2 seconds later. It takes a couple of minutes. So why don't we come back over to the slides? Does anybody have questions about that demo?
I can't see anything.
Okay.
I've definitely got a few questions, but not specifically about that, so I'll wait
Okay.
through.
Okay. All right, cool. So while we're waiting for that audit thing to come through, we'll go back over there when we're done here. We'll talk about centralizing, which to me is the wonderful part about this, because in SQL Server, I got to go and I have this whole setup. I have slides also in my GitHub. There's many on my blog. There's presentations about SQL Server Audit too. So if you're interested in that or extended events, I have presentations on that stuff as well. But the thing is with SQL Server Audit, you got to set up the audit. You have the files on local, on disks attached to the server, and then you have to have a link server. Well, this is how I set it up: a link server to send it over to the central server, with agent jobs and all that good stuff. Whereas in Azure, it's lovely because I can just say, put all, set all my databases up to go into this log analytics, and there's my centralized. Now it's all in one place that I can query from, right? So that's the really nice thing about Azure. And then, like I mentioned, I think I said when I don't really go into log analytics and query it, quite frankly, because what I do is create a logic app that can report on the data, right? So in this case, is a basic workflow that takes us through some steps to get that. Now, one thing to note is that if you have left the default auditing policy in place, like you just leave with the, those PowerShell commands I showed you at the beginning. I was going to show you that in demo too, so maybe we have time, we'll back over there when we look at the audit data. The thing is, when you set your audit policy to what I said, just getting permission and schema type changes, you can do this reporting. If you leave the default, the CSV file is going to get too big, probably can't get emailed to you. So So just note that. So first you set up recurrence, right? Again, this is in UTC time. So I set it up at 10. I don't know, I think it comes at like 3 in the morning, my time or something. So just so you know, this is like, you know, it's basic. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. You know, once a day at this time, it's going to run this logic app. Then it's going to take the custom query, the one in the slide that didn't work until I put it in there again from somewhere else and it did work, that query. And then, it, you know, you put in your resource information and your query and your time range and all that. And this is what it's going to run once a day, right? It's going to run that query once a day, get that information. And then it's going to create a CSV because I tried to format it into the body of an email. And quite frankly, that was complicated. And I figured, well, people can just double click on a file just as easily. And so it's going to put in a CSV. So that's what it's doing here. Just from value means from the values that are in the previous step, right? And then it's going to send an email with the attachment. So basically output is that attachment from the CSV table, right? And then, you know, you put your subject, your to, and all that good stuff. And then what I didn't do, because I didn't know, I didn't put an attachment's name. I just figured it a default attach like this thing, Azure Audit Last Day was, say, if you don't put something there, it just doesn't send the results, which is weird because it's not required, right? It's never read, but just note, you got to put an attachment's name there. It's not going to put a default name and then it's just not going to send and you're going to wonder what happened because that happened to me. So anyway, that's the CSV. So then it sends it. Unless you have, like I said, if you have the default audit policy in place and it's got everything and it's like really big, a lot of stuff's happening, that's not going to work. And that's another reason I love to it down, narrow it down. I always say that less is more with auditing anyway. Even if you could audit everything, don't, because how are you going to weed through it all? It's like finding a needle in a haystack kind of thing. So I like to get as little as I need with the auditing, which for me personally is somebody's making security changes, somebody's making some kind of schema, server object, you know, database object changes, like that kind of stuff. I want to know because that's the kind of stuff that can break stuff. I don't know, somebody's inserting somebody SQL Server is saying at version and like all this other stuff in the back. I don't want to know all that stuff. That's just, it's a lot of noise. So before we jump back over to the demo thingy again, so just really quickly, this is extended events. So it's very similar to SQL Server. So it has this nice GUI. If you've worked with Azure SQL, you'll know how setting up tables now, you can't just do a GUI and you right click and say new table, you get a script. You want to add, you know, you do perms and things, you get a script. No, with extended events, nicely, they left the GUI in there, thankfully, because it's not always really self-explanatory how you do these kinds of things. So I gave an example of the script. The main difference is here from SQL Server to Azure is that, of course, you have to use the storage account, right? So you're going to need a credential set up, and hopefully I have something on resources slide. If I don't, I'll add something about credentials, but if you haven't worked with that kind of stuff before, but it's pretty straightforward, you know. So there's stuff in my book. I'm not saying go buy my book. I was planning to add some to the slides for free. So I don't want to be like, oh, go buy my book to find out. But the thing is, it's a little bit tricky. You got to set up the storage. You got to like do this the shared access storage credential. And then you have to use that in your, you know, you have to use that information in your credential so that your extended event for SQL Server, you know, from Azure SQL can actually access that blob to put it in there. Then, you know, you're back to the same thing. Why I don't use this is that you've got to somehow read the files and loop through them in the storage. And so that's why I use Log Analytics with the built-in the audit functionality in the portal, because I still think it's easier than extended events. On SQL Server and AMA, it's a toss-up between SQL Server and audit and extended events for me. But in Azure SQL, I highly recommend using the audit functionality they built into the portal because it is the easiest way with all log analytics. It's just so simple. So then finally, we just do a quick screenshot of managed instance, right? Because it is like SQL Server, it is just like SQL Server, except, right, you need the credential so that you can read or write to the storage URL. So that's the difference. And then RDS is much the same. There's some other gotchas that I was going to add to the slide deck about RDS, just as because I know some people use that as in a comparison to Azure. But so then this is the resources slide I mentioned. We'll come back to that in a sec. So I don't think I actually did add anything about the credentials, so I will add that later. So now that we have done that, let's see and hope that, hallelujah, it worked. I'm always happy when my demos, so it did. So you got the create table in here, right? So then you see there's some other stuff that comes through, right? Other, you know, this stuff that SQL Server does in the background for you, right? And that I didn't necessarily like this. I think I ran the rest. So, you know, so there's just some stuff. So that stuff, some of this stuff, blanks and other things would be gone if we, let's see, do I have time? I think I have a couple minutes here. So if we go ahead and say, let's do this really quickly. Actually, you're going to see it from scratch because I don't think I've ever used a CLI before. So this is what happens. Nobody saw this in my demo before, so there you go. When you first open CLI, you're going to get this. You're going to decide between Bash and PowerShell. You can change again later anyway, but so you have to say PowerShell, and then you have to create a storage. You have to have a storage mounted for it to use for whatever purposes that it needs. And it incurs a small monthly cost. Anyway, you know, so that, yeah. So it takes a minute. So I don't know how long this is going to take, because I remember doing this before and it's sort of sluggish. But basically what I was going to do now is show you and put back the slide. Basically, I was just going to go get the policy, right? And we're going to see it was default. That's why we were getting all that other stuff. And then all I was going to do was go and change it. That's all. So once you're in the CLI, all you have to do is, oops, I didn't mean I was going to click on here, and just get this and plop it in there, right? Same, you know, same with this get. You just copy that, plop it in there, and it gives you this information. This is basically the screenshot from when I did it before. That could take a few minutes, but if, right as I said that, and I will warn you that when you set your PowerShell policy, so when you go and set your server audit, it takes a little time too, but this just so to give you a little feel for this, and then we'll stop and take more, I'll take more questions. Then we're pretty much done after this. So anyway, I would just copy this. Apparently I didn't copy it. And then, oops, if I get in there, that's probably the problem. So I just pasted from the slide. Oh, that's because I changed the name of my database. This is why. So the long story is that I used to have a subscription, an MSDN subscription in my old Azure portal account. And then my company changed something. And so now it's in my new Azure portal account. And so I didn't set everything up. So yeah, it's a little less polished than the last time because I didn't change everything. But what would normally happen here is when I came in here and I had the right database name, then it would work. Josephine test. Okay. Server name. This will work. This will work. Auditing test. Dang. See, I forgot that bit. I just started naming things and then what did I say it was? Josephine. Okay. Boy. Oh, I guess that's fine. Josephine. Geez, I can't remember anything unless I write it down. It's gotten really bad. Okay. Let's see. Oops. I know people love when you're like, do on the fly. Well, you know what? It's supposed to work. When I sort my stuff out, then it actually works. Oh, you know what? That's because you can't put the database name in there. You have to put the server. See, you're still learning new things because I'm still learning new things. Okay, so auditing test. I just really want you to see this in action. I'm at this point where it's like, this is going to happen. There we go. Got to update my slides. Okay, so now you see this. These are the defaults, right? This is defaults. And then when you want to change it, right, we're just going from the slide. And if I actually change the slide appropriately and put it in there, auditing test. And yeah, and then we say set. So that all we're doing is this set command so that in the future, we wouldn't get all this other little stuff. So then you hit enter and you wait for a while and you wonder if it's working, like the last time I did a demo, and then you think it's not working and then you try to exit and then it works. And we won't go through that this time, but trust me when I say this will actually work, even though the last command had a fix, this works, it sets it. And if you did the get that we just did up here again, once it's done, you would now see a portion of this list, which is complicated. I haven't figured out how, because it says this and then it starts doing ... So I always make sure to set these ones, knowing if I see a portion of this and ... that I know it's all of these. So anyway, that's that. And like I said, that will filter your results down so much smaller so you can do the reporting that I've mentioned, right? You can send that CSV. I'm still working on a ticket. So I do a SQL Server. I send a ticket to the ticket system. We have Jira every week. I'm still working on that for Azure SQL. So that's to be determined, but so that's coming. Oh, look, it's done. See, I talked my way through. That's why I kept talking. Can always fill the space. So this is what I mean here. So now I get it again, right? And you see that it starts with the ones I set and then ... So that's why I'm always very careful that ... will mean this whole grouping of stuff I've set. So I always make sure if I change it, I always set it to these action groups, knowing, okay, that's what that's going to mean. It's going to mean all those things. So anyway, if I did some other change, and I think we might be running out of time, so I don't want to like go over, but if I did another, say I created another table in here and then was patient enough to wait for my audit data to come through, then I would see, oh, sometimes, you know, you can pin stuff to your, so I could pin this, like I could pin this to my dashboard. You know, you have like a dashboard in Azure, so you could like do that too. So you don't have to click around in here too if you feel like running this stuff, but it could take a minute. Oh, here's what I can show you though, while we're waiting. See this, and see if this, so then it came up, see, it's like this blank. That's what I'm talking about when I was on that slide and I said in the red box, like you might need to filter this out of the audit. That's only when, it only seems to come up when you change audit policy stuff. So something in the background is getting audited, but it's not really sure what you're, some kind of internal thing, right? So it's so you might see that because I just changed the audit policy, but it doesn't really give you much more than that. Anyway, so, but we'd have to wait. So I created that other table, right? You know, you saw me create this other table here. It'll come through the audit again, but then it won't have any other extra stuff like down here, how this had some other stuff. It's not going to have any of that anymore. It's going to have any like where it's going to show that one line now because I updated the policy. Oh, and it shows 2 lines. Well, it proves me wrong. Sometimes it does that too. And I figured out why. Sometimes it does it twice. Auditing, yeah. So there's always something else proving me wrong, but there should be 1 line, but sometimes there's 2, and I haven't figured that out yet either. So let me write that down because I sometimes forget to like go back and research. Anyways, that's the end. So let me put up the slides. I think I might have gone a little longer than the 30 minutes or whatever we were going to do, but hold on, let me get to the slide that you actually want to see maybe. So we got the resources slide. Again, like I said, this is up in GitHub. And so you can click on these links at your leisure later. And then thank you for having me to the group. And feel free to contact me on Twitter. SQL Kitty kind of leads you back to Twitter anyway. So then, you know, you can always just send me a message. I think you can say, or tag me on Twitter too, if you want. So anyway, hopefully that was helpful.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Since you mentioned GitHub, which repo contains your slides? Is that the conference presentations?
Okay. Yeah, conference presentations.
All right. And
yeah,
and that one has handle. Is it SQL bits handle Azure SQL auditing with ease? That one?
Yeah, yes, exactly. And I think there's a script there's a script in there too. I was going to try to maybe organize this a little bit better, but there's a script in there too. I think that's associated with the things like the custom query and the PowerShell I was running. It's in there too.
Right.
Yeah.
If I just very briefly share the screen so everyone can see that. I've got it right here. Right, so that's where we should look,
Okay.
right? And
good, yeah.
looks
Okay.
like you've got a few PDFs here, and then there's some SQL scripts here.
Yes,
There's
so
a text
those,
file.
yes, so that Azure SQL Auditing code text, that's the one you want for this, and handle Azure SQL Auditing with ease. The rest are all SQL servers. So if you're still, I mean, we still have plenty of SQL servers where I am. So if that's interesting to you, then yeah, those other ones will give you that.
Brilliant. So let me stop my share. There was one question in the chat by Christoph. You still can't see the chat, Josephine, right?
Yeah, no, I can see it again. For some reason, I lost it for a while, but yeah, okay, I see. Can you filter queries that use a certain amount of memory CPU? There is affected rows one. I'm not sure how, so maybe in the case of return more than X lines, you could definitely get that because there is an affected rows one, but I don't think there's any memory or CPU in audit. I think you'd have to use extended events for that kind of stuff. I'm pretty sure you have to use extended events because extended events has that whole, it's not just auditing, right? It's all, you can also use it for performance model. You can do other things with extended events. So I think that's what you would be left with for memory or CPU.
So is it fair to say with audits, you get what happened and who did it, but you don't get any diagnostic information?
It's not really, yeah. I mean, you might, like I said, you get affected rows because it's in there. Yeah, client IP stuff like that, application name is sort of more like, yeah, who did something and when and what they did.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Any other questions from the audience? Feel free to either unmute yourself or put it in the chat. Don't see anyone typing. So I had a question. Are there any hidden gems? Can you give any examples of stuff you found going through your audit logs that you would never have known about otherwise?
Oh, well, let's say in Azure. Okay, so in Azure, we've been very careful about locking down perms. So there haven't been a lot of hidden gems because we haven't given people perms. We haven't given a lot of perms. They have read write, and I don't, read write to your heart's content for the most part. Well, we're trying to limit read write more because we don't want people having direct access to the database anymore. But we are pretty liberal with that still. The thing is, on SQL Server, let me tell you, because that's where the hidden gems are really, because with auditing and why I love auditing so much, and I say that, and actually my husband's like, do you really love auditing? No, I love catching people doing things that they're not supposed to be doing is what I love. And going back to them and they are like looking behind them, I think, to figure out how I know. But and I'm always polite about it, but we had the SA user was shared around to everybody. So people were using SA, but they didn't even know the power they had, thankfully, because they were just doing regular stuff. Nobody was going crazy, but we have people who have perms, elevated perms, who like created databases in dev and like promoted them, basically made it like prod, and we found that out. We found stuff like people had these elevator perms in prod even and started creating their own schemas inside production product databases, and then started doing this giant things and creating terrible tables like text fields. I asked the guy, why did you create a text field? Well, because I wanted to put the whole URL in there. I was like, what? Wait, what? You put the whole URL in the database? He's like, yeah. But how are you going to use it? Well, I'm going to parse through it. I'm like, well, why didn't you parse it before you put it in the database? Well, I didn't know how. I was like, oh my God. Okay. And now that database is such a mess. It's like, I can't do full integrity checks on it anymore because the text field, yeah. Anyway, so those are the kinds of things I find. Oh, excuse me. I never cough until I'm on a call.
Yeah, no worries. Still no other questions here. So final one for me, and then we can stop the recording. does this apply to SQL Server within Synapse as well and SQL Serverless, or is it just proper Azure SQL and Azure SQL dedicated database or whatever it's called?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. Excuse me. Of course, I haven't coughed this much in forever. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, just I don't know about Synapse, quite frankly. Let me write that down. But, I don't think you can do that over there. I think this is like Azure SQL Database.
Okay. All right.
Only because it's like SQL Server Audit, and I'm not sure how Synapse, all that stuff works, but I would say no. I don't think you can do this exact thing on there.
Okay. All right. Kai, did you want to ask another question or? No. All right. So let me stop the recording. Thank you so much, Josephine. Particularly the slides you showed. I think they've got a wealth of information, and people will appreciate going through those resources. I definitely will. So yeah, thanks very much again. I'll stop.
Oh yeah, of course. Now. Yeah, thanks for having me. I need to update the slide deck. I realize it's like 4 months old. I've added some stuff, so I'm going to put that. I'll do that today. I'll put it in GitHub so everybody has the current.
Fantastic.
Yeah.